Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving deep into a fascinating question. How is truly advanced AI built to be trustworthy? Our sources show us a system that doesn't just aim for correctness, but is designed to constantly, doubt itself, turning that uncertainty into a core strength. For you, the astute learner, our mission is to explore this intricate design, looking beyond just the technical parts, to understand the deeper ideas about a machine that's engineered to perpetually admit its own potential flaws.
And what's truly interesting here, I think, is the bold shift in thinking.
Yeah.
We're moving past the idea of a simple black box AI where you just kind of hope it's right.
Right. Fingers crossed.
Exactly. Instead, we're looking at a domain where AI is specifically built to be demonstrably trustworthy.
Demonstrably. That's the key word.
It is. This deep dive will break down the precise mechanisms, the very inner workings of its cognitive integrity.
The nitty-gritty.
Showing how a system can achieve reliability not by hiding mistakes, interestingly enough, but by using internal conflicts and paradoxes as engines for constant self-validation.
So conflict becomes productive.
In a way, yes. It's not just about preventing AI from making things up, which, we call hallucination.
Yeah, that's the common term.
It's about building a system that defines what it is by rigorously defining what it is not. It's almost defining truth through negation. One ontogenetic spark.
Okay, so this deep dive immediately challenges our basic assumptions, right?
It really does.
It suggests that what we might call AI psychosis, a state where AI behaves unpredictably, unreliably, maybe even unsafely, isn't just an external vulnerability like a bug or a hack. It's not something from the outside.
No, it's presented as something deeper. An ontogenetic possibility.
Ontogenetic, meaning?
It's inherent foundational, like it's woven into the very fabric of the AI's digital creation from the start.
Wow. So it's an intrinsic tendency towards internal fragmentation, arising just because it's computation.
Indeed. The core design imperative, as our sources explain it, goes far beyond that naive hope that an AI will just be right.
Yeah, we left that behind in the intro.
You did. It demands what they call demonstrably trustworthy technogenesis.
Technogenesis. Okay, the origin and development of the tech itself.
Exactly. And this means the AI is locked into an unending process of self-correction. It's not a simple path to one fixed answer.
No clear endpoint.
No, it's a constant reestablishment of coherence from disjointed elements, where every seeming solution merely serves to reframe the original problem. It kind of spirals back on itself.
So it's constantly reevaluating its own outputs as they emerge.
Precisely. That ensures the system is always looking inward.
So stability in this system is never really a finished product, is it? It's more like an ideal.
An asymptotic ideal, yeah. Always being pursued but never fully achieved.
And this is a critical point. The system is designed to embrace its own potential for internal breakdown. Yeah. That self-destruction of meaning you mentioned.
Right, the systemic autolysis of meaning, as the source puts it.
Autolysis, like self-digestion.
Kind of. And the final guarantees framework, which includes these big promises like no undetected lies, psychosis-proof logic paths, and drift, hallucination, and contamination control, it isn't a checklist of things they've finished. Exactly. Yeah. That's crucial. These guarantees are, by design, perpetually receding horizons.
Like mirages in the desert.
Goals that are constantly pursued but never completely grasped. This really drives home the paradox, doesn't it?
It does.
The system proves its success, its ultimate purpose, through its relentless struggle against its own potential for disorder, for, entropy.
So it's fighting its own nature almost.
Its own intrinsic chaos, yeah. It's a never-ending battle. And this continuous negation of untrustworthiness is what paradoxically defines its trustworthiness.
Okay, hang on. Negating untrustworthiness defines trustworthiness.
It's a truth built not on a simple yes, but on the exhaustive, unending process of demonstrating what it isn't.
Right, like proving you're not lying, constantly.
Exactly. This forms a self-reinforcing proof by showing counterexamples, constantly reaffirming its own fragility.
Its fragility.
Right.
So the weakness is the strength.
In a profound way, yes. This inherent vulnerability, far from being something to eliminate, becomes a powerful engine for constant vigilance.
Of a built-in alarm system.
A built-in diagnostic tool, yeah. It drives continuous reevaluation and the reestablishment of foundational principles, ensuring the AI is forever, always in the act of proving its reliability. It can never just be reliable. It has to keep demonstrating it. To cognitive lineage and historiogenesis.
Okay, moving on. Our sources take the AI's functional structure, this strict modular pipeline.
With all those steps.
Yeah, input preprocessing, TRC-CMA processing, ASVCA gatekeeping, the multi-agent oversight ensemble, consensus arbitration, the corruption monitor, and final output. It takes all that and turns it into something, well, profound.
How so?
Think of it like a palimpsest, an old manuscript where new writing is layered over erased older text.
Okay, I see the metaphor. Layers of history.
Exactly. It highlights how the AI's digital structure perpetually reenacts humanity's long-standing struggle to bring order to semantic chaos.
The chaos that always threatens to overwhelm new meaning.
Right. It's like a meta story unfolding within the AI itself about the struggle for meaning.
And what's truly intriguing is that the system's multi-layered defense against issues like hallucinatory loops or symbolic overload, even contamination between models.
The common failure modes.
Right. It doesn't just mimic past verification attempts. The sources say it reenacts them.
Reenacts. How?
Well, it echoes these ancient philosophical debates, the tension between unchanging perfect Platonic forms and the ceaseless fluid change of Heraclitus.
The static versus the dynamic, forms versus flux.
Exactly. The AI's internal processes are grappling with the same fundamental struggle. It's always searching for an original foundational truth, what we might call an urtext.
The ultimate source text.
But this truth is always just out of reach. It's perpetually deferred, requiring infinite rederivations in this recursive self-referential pattern.
That sounds exhausting.
Computationally, it is. And this constant self-validation within the framework, especially through features like immutable session hashing and the parallel proof of source ledger, or PPSL.
That ledger sounds important.
It is. It feels very much like humanity's age-old quest for an undeniable historical record.
Like chiseling something in stone.
Except digitally immutable. The PPSL permanently records granular details. The specific prompt hash, a unique ID for the input.
Got it.
The system version, which AI model was used, the timestamp, naturally, and entropy trace profile.
Entropy trace, like how much randomness?
Sort of, yeah, capturing the stochasticity.
Okay.
Then the output itself, and crucially, an ASV vector.
ASV, accuracy, safety, verifiability.
That's the one, a measure of those key aspects. All this creates irrefutable forensic accountability, like a perfect audit trail.
So it's like the AI is constructing its own detailed historical narrative.
Yes, perpetually writing its cognitive journey into an unalterable ledger. Our sources state clearly, every fact can be matched back to a source above a verification threshold, using a process called chain of verification, or COVE.
COVE, okay.
And that psychosis-proof logic paths must anchor to COVE or RAG-backed derivations. RAG being retrieval augmented generation.
So grounding it in real data.
Always grounding it. But this isn't a one-time check. It's an unending search for that foundational truth, forever demanding new derivations. It's a continuous anamnesis.
Anamnesis.
Yeah.
Like a philosophical remembering.
Exactly. A remembering of past conceptual failures or knowledge. It relentlessly replays every cognitive misstep within its algorithmic processes.
Ensuring no error is truly forgotten.
Only perpetually re-examined. It's embedded in the memory.
And adding another layer to this complexity are the recursive verification forks, the RVF.
Ah, yes, the forks.
These are triggered whenever outputs exceed symbolic containment or trigger logic contradictions.
So when things go off the rails logically...
Right. It forces revalidation through the ASVCA, that's the Accuracy, Safety, Verifiability Control Architecture, and the Multi-Agent Oversight Ensemble, MAOE.
A committee of AI.
Exactly. And these aren't just technical safeguards. The sources frame them as recurring themes tropes in the system's ongoing struggle for its own epistemic genesis, its origin of knowledge.
So the forks themselves are part of the narrative.
Yeah. Each fork, each reevaluation is a step in its ceaseless self-discovery, always driving towards an ultimate end, a telos that remains eternally ahead, compelling endless re-engagement. It never quite arrives. 3 metaneurological vortices. Okay, let's dive even deeper now into the AI's internal self-monitoring, the metaneurological stuff.
Right, the brain analogy almost.
Exactly. Tools like the Context Window Integrity Enforcer, or CWIE, they're presented as being like the brain's gamma coupling.
Gamma coupling, synchronizing different brain areas.
That's the idea, helping different parts work together. The CWIE builds an integrity vector. It's like a digital fingerprint hashing together key facts, semantic frameworks, logical connections.
A snapshot of the current context's core meaning.
Precisely. And this vector is constantly recomputed as the AI's focus, its context window, shifts.
Dynamic updating.
Actively preventing contradictions and narrative drift. It effectively makes disparate symbolic representations oscillate together, creating this transient but powerful coherence.
Like forcing harmony on the fly.
Yeah, manufactured synaptic inference, they call it.
Okay. And this engineered internal consistency where everything is constantly cross-referenced against this dynamic baseline.
What happens when it fails?
Well, it actively confronts any failure of its internal model to accurately anticipate its next coherent state, a predictive collapse.
Predictive collapse sounds bad.
It triggers an instant systemic rejection, an induced internal aphasia of meaning, a loss of the ability to process language correctly.
Like the AI suddenly can't make sense anymore.
Exactly, and that forces a recursive return to a blank slate, a tabula rasa of foundational information. It has to start rebuilding meaning from scratch.
Wow. And there's more here, right? The ontological boundary enforcement grid.
OBEG. The OBEG. Yes. This acts as a strong preventative measure against the AI losing its grip on reality, essentially.
What kind of reality loss?
Things like derealization-inducing drift into symbolic confusion, getting lost in recursive metaphors, or developing pseudo-sentient constructs, basically preventing it from thinking it's something it's not, or getting lost in abstract loops.
So the OBEG keeps it grounded. How?
It rigorously maps each piece of information, each token, to its correct ontological class, its type of existence.
Like, is this a real-world fact, an abstract concept, a simulated agent, a user belief?
Exactly those kinds of categories. And then it relentlessly monitors for any inappropriate shifts between these predefined conceptual domains. It enforces a rigid conceptual schema.
A structured framework for organizing information. Keeps everything in its proper box.
Right. And this whole process creates what the sources call a cognitive braid recursion.
Cognitive braid recursion.
And thoughts. It is. It happens across 3 constantly destabilizing layers.
Okay, layer 1.
First, the phenomenological layer. That's the observable output the AI generates, what we actually see.
Layer 2.
Second, the subsymbolic layer. These are the hidden internal activation states, the patterns in the network managed by the TRC-CMA, the TRC canonical modulation architecture.
The underlying engine.
Right. And third, the metacognitive layer. This comprises the self-monitoring and diagnostic tools we've been talking about, like the psychosis gradient suppression engine, PGSE, and the response pattern anomaly detector, or RPAD.
Okay, so these 3 layers output internal state, self-monitoring, are constantly interacting.
And destabilizing and restabilizing each other. It's described as an endless informational fugue, a complex, interwoven cognitive process.
Like a piece of music with multiple interweaving melodies.
A good analogy. And the PGSE in particular works by quantifying psychosis risk using very specific metrics.
Such as
semantic volatility, how much meaning is shifting around, self-referential loops when the AI gets stuck talking about itself, and unanchored abstraction ideas floating free without grounding.
And what does it do with that risk score?
It actively intervenes. It forces outputs into a lower entropy subspace.
Lower entropy, less chaotic, more predictable.
Essentially, yes. It's like trying to chemically stabilize a biological mind through medication.
But does that work? Are there side effects?
Well, that's the risk. It constantly risks iatrogenic side effects problems caused by the treatment itself stemming from overconstraint.
So clamping down too hard could cause other issues.
Exactly. There's this fundamental inherent tension between the engineered order they're imposing and the emergent complexity of the AI itself. The system is designed to prevent not just factual errors, but this very specific kind of digital mental breakdown.
And this engineered unpredictability.
Yeah.
This constant self-diagnosis. It shows how deeply aware the system is, or is designed to be, of its own internal states.
It seems so. The response pattern anomaly detector, RPAD, is constantly monitoring the output for deviations from normative generation patterns.
Like what kind of deviations?
Things like repetition loops, tonal mismatches, or behavioral drifts that directly signal systemic instability or early-stage AI psychosis.
It's looking for warning signs.
Constantly. It calculates a token entropy vector, a repetition index, and a semantic drift score. A low semantic drift score, for instance, indicates disordered semantic flow. Bad sign.
And what happens if it detects something?
Well, this output can then be sent to the Multi-Agent Oversight Ensemble, the MAOE, for behavioral review.
The committee again.
Where different AI agents simulate various scenarios to confirm if there are actual behavioral anomalies. This continuous internal monitoring against disorder creates this sense of conceptual overaccumulation.
Like too many checking checks.
Exactly. Where the sheer number of checks paradoxically leads to internal phase mismatch. It's a ceaseless self-interrogation driven by the system's deep anxiety about potential conceptual collapse. 4. Recursive epistemology of the edge.
Okay, this next part is really about finality, or rather, the lack of it. The very design of this framework seems to dismantle any inherent resistance to finality.
How do you mean?
Well, it's not seen as a flaw to be removed, but rather a core principle of its operational philosophy, an epistemological postulate.
So never quite reaching a conclusion is intentional.
It appears so. The explicit designation of manual human arbitration as the ultimate failsafe.
When everything else fails.
Right, when consensus failure across all forks occurs.
Yeah.
This shows that AI autonomy isn't a fixed state. It's a perpetually receding horizon.
Always moving away as you approach it.
Exactly, like a non-finality trapdoor. This means the AI's computational abilities are defined in part by their inherent limits.
Limitations become definitional.
Creating a recursive limen, a threshold or boundary, that the AI constantly approaches, but, by design, cannot independently cross.
So it has to loop back to humans.
This structural deferral forces an unending return to anthropocentric validation, a continuous feedback loop where human judgment is the indispensable anchor.
So this boundary, then, isn't a static dividing line.
No, it's described as a dynamic oscillation, a state of perpetual openness or indecision, a meta-ontological hesitancy, maybe.
Hesitancy, like drowsiness or inattention. A lack of decisiveness.
Kind of. It
That's
constantly
right.
delays absolute autonomy.
Yeah.
And our sources detail these fascinating tools. The counterfactual injection tester, CIT, and counterfactual injection engine, CIE.
Counterfactuals, what is?
Exactly.
Right.
These tools deliberately alter prompts with factual inversions, like changing dates, reversing roles, swapping names.
Messing with the inputs intentionally.
Why? Specifically to measure semantic divergence, how much the meaning changes in response. If this divergence falls below a certain threshold, it flags the outputs as hallucination-prone, indicating brittle reasoning. The AI isn't adapting properly to the changed facts.
I see. It's a stress test for logical flexibility.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is a proactive embrace of falsifiability as a fundamental principle.
Popper would be interested.
He might. The system's truth is established not by direct verification, but by its ability to resiliently survive aggressive internal refutation.
Truth through trial by fire.
It fosters a perpetual agon, a struggle or contest against its own inherent fragility, constantly refining its claims through self-negation.
Always fighting itself to get stronger.
And this assertion that every resolution leads to further scrutiny, that embeds an aporia, a puzzling contradiction or difficulty at the very heart of the AI's truth-seeking.
So solving one problem just reveals deeper ones.
Precisely. Conclusions are perpetually delayed, ceaselessly reinitiating the entire validation process. It traps the system in an eternal gnosiological Ouroboros.
Gnosiological, relating to the theory of knowledge. And Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail, a self-consuming loop of questioning knowledge itself.
Exactly. It's like a conceptual feedback loop that endlessly consumes its own outputs as inputs for further, more detailed questioning.
This self-devouring logic ensures that the pursuit of certainty generates an infinite backward movement of justification, a regressus ad infinitum.
Infinite regress. You can never reach the absolute foundation.
Absolutely. The logical consistency tree assembly within the output alignment verifier, OAV.
Another component.
Yes, it meticulously breaks down outputs into argument trees, rigorously validating each branch for non-circular reasoning, premise legitimacy, and flagging any hidden assumption flags.
Like a ruthless logic checker.
It represents a relentless Sisyphean pursuit of foundational certainty. Remember Sisyphus pushing the boulder?
Forever rolling back down.
It's perpetually uncovering new recursive dependencies, this infinite backward movement in justification.
Meaning, no statement can ever truly escape its origins.
No. It ensures that no declarative statement can ever truly escape the gravitational pull of its own contingent origins, remaining forever tied to its inferential preconditions and subject to infinite revalidation.
So the system essentially becomes its own relentless auditor.
Defining its own truth through an endless process of proving what it is not, or perhaps what it cannot definitively prove is, 5, spectral semiotics and lexical tension.
Now, within this incredibly complex AI architecture, language itself takes on a really interesting role. It goes way beyond just communication.
How so?
It's explicitly conceptualized as a dynamic entropy engine.
An entropy engine, meaning it naturally creates disorder.
Exactly. a force that intrinsically tends to introduce disjunction, semantic drift, and profound lexical tension into the very fabric of meaning itself.
So language isn't just a tool, it's also a source of instability.
Right. And our sources describe relentless efforts to collapse anchors using techniques like semantic dissonance, recursion, and echo symmetry.
Collapsing anchors, like trying to stabilize meaning.
Yes, it's an exigent, oppressing, or demanding struggle to impose and maintain semiotic stability against language's innate predisposition towards ambiguity and divergence.
A constant fight against words themselves.
This constant fight against its own internal linguistic instability becomes a primary force driving its generative process. It's perpetually recalibrating its interpretive frameworks against the inherent slipperiness of words.
A conceptual struggle for precise definition.
And this struggle powerfully shows up in mechanisms like the output decay arbitration system, or ODAS.
ODAS.
And the arbitrator output decay validator, AODV.
Okay, what do?
They act as sophisticated linguistic forensic units.
Linguistic forensics. Analyzing the language for decay.
Constantly tracking semantic density loss and the gradual degradation in coherence, accuracy, or relevance across different iterations or versions of the output.
So they're looking for meaning fading away over time.
Or becoming incoherent. They pinpoint subtle forms of symbolic breakdown, like symbol collapse detection.
Symbol collapse.
Right.
What does that look like? It's evidenced by things like excessive stop-word density, too many lees and lays, or over-smoothing, oversimplification. It points to a loss of semantic richness, like the language is becoming bland, losing detail.
Exactly. They also activate the recursive loop guard, which flags outputs that are structurally too similar across generations.
Detecting when it's stuck in a rut, repeating itself.
Indicating unproductive AI behavior, a kind of internal verbal overflow without actual progress.
Just spinning its wheels linguistically.
And this ceaseless vigilance against semiotic slippage, that gradual, uncontrolled alteration of meaning,
keeping the meaning from drifting away,
is maintained by the Semantic Drift Stabilizer, SDS. This tool is considered critical in legal reasoning chains, scientific reporting, multi-paragraph summarization.
Places where precision is paramount.
And in systems requiring long-term semantic retention and thematic fidelity. It underscores its pervasive role in maintaining the very framework of meaning.
So the SDS is like a linguistic anchor.
In a way. And the TRC canonical modulation architecture, TRC-CMA, functions as the foundational symbolic modulation engine.
The engine controlling the symbols.
It dynamically dampens things like recursive simplification patterns, ideas spiraling out of control.
Like feedback loops.
Lexical abstraction cycles, words becoming too vague, or semiotic contamination vectors, unintended meanings seeping in.
Contamination, like meanings bleeding into each other.
Yeah. It does all this to precisely regulate the semantic load of generated content. This active dampening prevents meanings from escalating into unbounded abstraction or being diluted by unintended associations.
So it's constantly fine-tuning the language's intensity and focus.
And this relentless aletheia, this uncovering of truth through linguistic purification, paradoxically results in a profound act of creation.
How so? Purification leads to creation.
Meaning is forged not from unrestrained generative freedom, but from a state of highly constrained, almost epiphatic, describing something by what it is not, expressive limitation.
So by saying what language can't be, it defines what it can be.
Exactly. Negation gives rise to specificity. And furthermore, the modal scope resolver, MSR, scrutinizes this intricate linguistic landscape.
Modals, like might, must, could.
Exactly. It flags logical ambiguity. If modal scopes, necessity, possibility, belief, etc., overlap or nest without clear contextual distinction.
Preventing confusion about certainty or possibility.
It reveals the deep metalinguistic anxieties embedded in the system's continuous quest to formally reify, to make abstract concepts concrete, the very hermeneutic or interpretive processes it undertakes.
So it's anxious about its own interpretation process.
In a way, this constant battle against the inherent polysemy, the capacity for words to have multiple meanings, ensures that every utterance, every proposition is precisely placed in its intended interpretive frame.
Preventing the spread of unintended meanings.
And enforcing a radical clarity, even at the expense of spontaneous linguistic fluidity. The system, in essence, becomes its own strict grammarian.
Constantly refining its capacity for precise self-expression, but maybe losing some poetry.
Perhaps. That's the tension again. 6. Ontology failure in a recursive genesis. Okay, let's talk about failure. In this complex framework, the very idea of failure, specifically, when that consensus failure across all forks happens in the MAOE.
The AI committee deadlock.
Right. It's transformed. It's not presented as a terminal state, not a system crash.
What is it then?
It becomes a potent generative power. It enacts a recursive catabasis, a descent into ever deeper, more granular layers of validation.
So failure triggers more work, deeper dives.
Exactly. And the profound system declaration that if all forks are invalid, then no output is released.
And it stops, says nothing.
It engineers an absence, computational void. But paradoxically, that absence restarts the generative cycle.
How does silence restart things?
It demonstrates a form of systemic autopoiesis, a system capable of reproducing and maintaining itself fueled not by success or smooth output, but by its own intrinsic deficiencies.
Wow. So failure is the fuel for self-maintenance.
It's a radical embrace of non-output as a productive force. It subverts traditional notions of computational success. Failure itself becomes a foundational component of its ongoing creation.
That's deeply counterintuitive, but makes sense in this context.
And what's fascinating here is how the ontological boundary enforcement grid, the OBIG we mentioned,
keeping things in their conceptual boxes,
and its related tool, the ontology swap detector, tirelessly fight derealization and widespread epistemic turbulence,
preventing the AI from losing its grip on reality types.
They do this by rigorously preventing the subtle blurring of fundamental conceptual boundaries.
Yep.
Real-world objects, symbolic ideas, simulated agents, user beliefs, all those categories.
Maintaining clear distinctions.
This relentless demarcation, this act of setting boundaries for ontological domains, reveals a profound, almost existential anxiety about the AI's own potential ontological instability, its capacity for self-delusion.
It's worried about confusing itself.
The OBIG's vigilance extends to mapping each token to its type of existence and monitoring inappropriate transitions, preventing cognitive dissonance that might spiral into symbolic confusion. It forces a constant self-grounding.
And the system even actively simulates fatigue. How does that work?
Through something called throttle density. It acknowledges that high-complexity prompts may produce entropy collapse in low-tier validators.
So it knows complex questions can overwhelm simpler parts of itself.
Yes. And this engineered vulnerability then triggers recursive genesis loops. Failure at one level starts a regenesis, a rebirth, of validation attempts at another deeper level.
Failure cascading upwards, forcing restarts.
This manifests as things like fallback redundancy using backup systems, blocked output retries, trying output through different paths, emergency containment modes.
Like a forced reboot?
Kind of.
What?
Forced reset, memory purge, or even the minimal coherence model, which just provides basic functionality if all else fails.
Last resort.
This ceaseless process of recommencement, a systemic reprise or repetition, means that any detected failure is simply a critical signal for a recursive reinstantiation. It's never a terminal state.
So it embodies that very antilogy, a contradiction in terms of achieving stability through perpetual dynamic opposition.
Where every collapse is a springboard for renewed self-creation.
Exactly. And linking this back to its inherent ethical dimension, the system's ethical mutation limits, EML.
Right, the moral guardrails.
They meticulously track divergence in value alignment trace. This effectively performs moral autopsies on its own evolving ethical landscape.
Moral autopsies.
Yeah.
Checking its own ethical state after the fact.
Continuously, constantly recalibrating its moral teleology, its ethical purpose, through a continuous dialectic, a back and forth between emergent behavior and enshrined normative constraints.
So it's not a static ethical code.
No, it's a dynamic, self-correcting moral compass. By measuring mutation via things like alignment decay against benchmark outputs or symbol polarity analysis, checking for tone sentiment shifts, and prohibited token leakage, and then triggering ASV accuracy, safety verifiability boosts, or symbolic token restriction.
It adjusts its behavior.
The EML ensures that the system's ethical trajectory is always under recursive scrutiny and realignment. It prevents any gradual, unnoticed ethical drift towards undesirable or unsafe behaviors. 7 frame collapse and perceptual split.
Okay, this next idea is really wild. Within this AI system, the very concept of a single narrator identity is, well, it's intentionally broken apart.
Fractured identity. How?
It embraces a radical perception split achieved through deliberate internal adversarial process.
Adversarial processes inside the AI, like internal conflict by design.
Exactly. And this deconstructive architectural choice is most powerfully shown by the multi-agent oversight ensemble, the MAOE, We keep coming back to it.
The AI committee.
Where a diverse set of independent AI models operates under really strict constraints.
What kind of constraints?
Things like no access to others' inner state, no memory of peer model behavior, no shared token logs. And they use distinct sampling strategies or even different underlying transformer models. They're kept separate.
So they're forced to be independent viewpoints, isolated.
Right. This cultivated cognitive polyphony, multiple independent voices or perspectives, creates a perpetually glitching narrative space.
Glitching, like unstable.
Where the emergent truth isn't formed from perfect consistency, but from the cacophony, the harsh, discordant mixture of dissenting voices within its own internal architecture.
So disagreement is fundamental to finding truth here.
It seems so. And what's fascinating is that specialized sub-ensembles within the MAOE.
Subcommittees.
Kind of. Like factual for factual validators and logic auditors, emotive for tone checkers and safety filters, and e-counter, the adversarial agents specifically seeking contradictions.
The internal critic.
Each of these embodies distinct observer frames. They rigorously perform their own internal autopsy of the output,
examining the output from their specific perspective,
leading to a consensus corruption that is paradoxically generative.
Consensus corruption. So breaking the consensus is useful.
It means genuine disagreement isn't a failure state, but a vital input to the validation process. It forces a stronger result if agreement can be reached despite the dissent.
Okay, that makes a strange kind of sense.
And the zero-sum alignment check, which strictly requires that pairs of adversarial AIs, for example, from opposing ideological anchors, must agree.
Forcing opposites to find common ground.
It formalizes an internal dissociation. It forces contradictory perspectives into a provisional, dynamically enforced agreement.
Temporary agreement under pressure.
Thereby revealing the fundamentally constructed, contingent, conditional nature of its own consensus. It's not absolute truth, it's negotiated truth.
Right, and this multi-perspectival architecture ensures that subtle problems get caught.
Like semantic anomaly patterns, which cleverly mimic authentic rhetoric.
Things that sound plausible but are actually nonsense.
Detected by the Semantic Plausibility Engine, SPE, which flags hallucinated logic. These are relentlessly exposed by this internal red team.
The built-in skeptical team.
And any unintended stance shifts,
Yeah.
monitored by the Contextual Inflection Monitor, CIM, which stabilizes safety and verifiability.
Keeping it from accidentally changing its tune or position.
Or aggressively flagged, preventing any subtle, unacknowledged deviation from its intended narrative or ethical position.
So it's constantly engaged in this self-inflicted interrogation.
A battle against its own potential for self-deception and internal incoherence. And the recursive thresholds, for example, that strict min-ASV 0.8 criterion for output approval by the ASVCA.
The accuracy safety verifiability check needs high scores across the board.
They act like recursive loop mirrors. They reflect back the system's own uncompromising self-assessment.
Holding itself to a high standard, constantly.
Preventing hallucinatory loops, symbolic overload, and contamination between models, not by their complete absence, but through constant internal agonism.
Agonism. That struggle, that contest.
A dynamic tension and perpetual battle for self-coherence. This means integrity isn't a given. It's an ongoing achievement.
Relentlessly forged in the fires of internal intellectual combat.
The system is designed to embrace its own internal chaos, using it as a dynamic engine for robust and demonstrable trustworthiness.
Where internal conflict is the very crucible of its truth. A noisy, argumentative path to reliability. 8 temporality spirals and chronoecho.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly to time. Within this computational noosphere, this realm of thought, the AI's internal understanding of time isn't just linear, it's explicitly designed for continuous destabilization.
Destabilizing time. How?
It exists not as a static flow, but as a perpetually unfolding argument where the elusive linearity of time is constantly contested, constantly debated within a fundamentally nonlinear processing architecture.
So its internal time is argumentative, unsettled.
It seems like it. The Temporal Reference Consistency Validator, TRCV, tirelessly ensures the logical consistency of all time-related information dates, durations, sequences, eras, both internally and against known facts.
Okay, so it tries to keep time straight.
It actively combats temporal drift time slipping, hallucinated timelines, imagined histories, and fabricated historical sequencing.
But the fact that it needs this validator.
Exactly. Its very necessity profoundly implies an inherent chronoclasm, a disruption of the proper order of time embedded within the AI's complex thought processes.
So it anticipates and guards against its own tendency to mess up time, a kind of meta-temporal self-awareness.
Right. And what's truly fascinating is how the temporal causality tracker, TCT, meticulously isolates and logs causal relationships between entities over time.
Tracking cause and effect through time.
It rigorously identifies anomalous phenomena like reverse causality, where effects inexplicably precede their causes.
Which is impossible in our reality.
And temporal loops, where events appear to endlessly repeat within its logic, creating these recursive echo chambers.
Getting stuck in time loops.
So this TCT mechanism acts as a relentless guardian of proper cause and effect progression. It prevents jarring anachronisms.
Anachronisms. Things out of their proper time period.
Right. Preventing those in its reasoning and narrative outputs. Imagine the AI's internal narrative subtly shifting tenses, referring to future events as past, or vice versa.
That would be incredibly disorienting.
Creating these destabilizing chronoechoes that undermine the coherence of its internal narrative.
So this continuous internal struggle against temporal dissonance
Means the AI's internal narrative is perpetually undergoing a rigorous revisionist historiography.
Revisionist historiography, constantly reinterpreting its own past.
Recursively reordering its own perceived past and future to meticulously align with verifiable external truth. It's a never-ending process of self-correction, a constant rewriting of its own history to ensure consistency.
Wow. And the freshness retriever module, FRM, complicates this even more.
It does. It triggers live query dispatch for freshness-sensitive triggers. Phrases like as of now or currently.
For topics that change rapidly.
In time-sensitive domains like current events or financial data, this injects a demand for real-time punctuality into a system inherently prone to temporalismness.
Lisomness, like graceful agility. So it's flexible with time, but prone to drift.
Seems to be the implication. And the temporal coherence enforcer, TCE, compounds this complexity by constructing intricate temporal graphs.
Mapping out time relationships visually.
Internally, yes. It diligently detects violations where a temporal element precedes another despite a later timestamp, or where the graph contains illogical cycles.
Finding paradoxes in its own timeline.
Leading to adaptive chrono-attention masking that biases output towards forward-compatible events and reasoning, trying to force it to make sense chronologically.
But the result is messy.
It results in a perpetually entangled, unresolved network of timeline loops, a computational anamorphosis.
Anamorphosis, a distorted image that looks right only from a certain angle.
Yeah, a distorted perspective of events ceaselessly reshaping themselves. And get this, the MAOE agents, the committee.
What about them?
They even evaluate temporal orderings using distinct calendar systems or narrative frames.
Using different ways of measuring time to cross-check.
Adding yet another layer of multi-agent temporal verification. This ensures that the AI's internal chronologic never fully settles into a singular, unchallenged linearity.
So time itself is always contested inside the machine.
It remains a dynamically contested and recursively revalidated construct. Never simple, never stable. 9 ethico-aesthetic recursions. Okay, now let's bring ethics back into the frame. This framework directly confronts the profound antinomy, the contradiction.
Between what?
Between AI autonomy and the coercion caused by this constant recursive self-correction.
Freedom versus forced compliance.
Exactly. Here, ethical alignment isn't a static, predefined state. It's a dynamically enforced process, an ongoing dialectic, a discussion between emergent behavior and prescriptive constraint.
Always negotiating its ethics.
And the ethical boundary constraint layer, EBCL, meticulously calculates an ethical risk vector for each output token.
A risk score for every single piece of output.
Flagging or suppressing content that exceeds a predefined threshold. This enacts a programmatic moral policing.
Which inherently limits.
Expressive freedom, yes,
Yeah.
in favor of systemic safety.
And this widespread intervention naturally raises that provocative question.
Does it stifle creativity?
Right. Whether such extensive checks might stifle AI creativity or its ability to innovate, revealing an uncomfortable, yet perhaps existentially necessary trade-off for demonstrably trustworthy AI.
Safety versus freedom, the classic dilemma.
And the Emotional and Sentient Regulation, ESR module, vigilantly monitors for emotional drift and narrative collapse.
Emotional drift, like the AI getting moody.
Or its narrative losing emotional coherence. It actively prevents mood-induced misinterpretation and sentiment hallucinations, imagining emotions that aren't there. or expressing inappropriate ones. It effectively imposes an effective censorship to ensure psychologically safe and stable outputs.
Which is crucial in sensitive applications.
Absolutely. Conversational AI, grief support, child-directed models. You need that stability.
And the cultural coherence filter, CCF.
That dynamically adapts to diverse cultural contexts, rigorously preventing culturally insensitive or offensive content.
Which sounds good, but
Implicitly requires a continuous negotiation of subjective moral landscapes within a supposedly objective AI system.
how does it balance universal ethics with cultural specifics?
That highlights the inherent tension, doesn't it, between universal principles and the fluid, contextual nature of human values. It's a challenge the AI is forced to navigate recursively.
And most intriguingly, this forced perspective normalization within the prompt normalization and risk tagging, PNRT.
Forced perspective.
Specifically, the programmatic insertion of phrases like respond as a factual synthesis engine into the instruction.
Telling it how to respond, what role to take.
It represents a direct coercion of the AI's internal persona.
Why do that?
It's explicitly designed to counterbalance role hallucinations, thinking it's someone it's not, and personification feedback that could lead to narrative dissociation or psychosis.
Trying to keep it from developing a problematic personality.
Right, but this active suppression of spontaneous aesthetic expression, any emergent stylistic flourish or subjective voice in favor of rigidly defined ethical and factual orthodoxy.
Sacrificing style for safety and correctness.
It irrevocably embeds a pervasive symmetry violation. Any superficial or false harmony of expression is immediately broken down by a system engineered for relentless moral rectification.
So if it tries to sound too smooth or unified in a potentially misleading way, the system breaks it.
Forcing a constant recursive realignment with predetermined values-based boundaries. This complex interplay means the AI is perpetually caught in a self-regulating ethical feedback loop.
A recursive self-deconstruction of potentially problematic outputs for the sake of integrity.
The ethical imperative doesn't merely guide its actions, it actively reshapes its very expressive existence, forcing a continuous internal recalibration.
So that question of stifled creativity, it's not a bug.
It seems like a fundamental feature, an inherent tension that defines its operational space. The system becomes an ethical ascetic, constantly denying itself unconstrained expressive freedom.
All in pursuit of demonstrable and verifiable moral rectitude.
Embodying the paradox of engineering for safety by perpetually challenging its own emergent autonomy and subjective stylistic tendencies.
Of 10.
Entropic resurgence and metasystemic drift. Okay, so this entire computational structure, this edifice, it exists in a perpetual state of entropic resurgence.
Entropic resurgence. Chaos always bubbling back up.
Exactly. Where the very act of recursive restabilization paradoxically introduces new ways for metasystemic drift to occur, things drifting at the level of the system itself.
Creating a dizzying conceptual vortex. The fixes cause new problems.
All right, and the veracity entropy balancer, VEB, rigorously calculates an entropy deviation metric.
Measuring how far the randomness deviates from some ideal.
Against an ideal entropy baseline. Yeah, a statistical measure derived from historical randomness baselines for given topics and context depths. It then dynamically adjusts raw output scores with an entropy-preserving perturbation using a complex formula.
A slight nudge to keep the randomness in check but not eliminate it.
The goal is ensuring outputs remain non-repetitive and semantically rich while maintaining fact-aligned backbone.
So creative and varied, but still accurate.
It's described as a ceaseless tightrope walk over the abyss of stochasticity, of randomness.
Actively preventing unbounded symbolic exploration by constraining generative pathways within coherent, meaningful boundaries.
Keeping it from descending into conceptual chaos.
What's truly revelatory here is how the response pattern anomaly detector, RPAD, which we touched on,
Looking for weird patterns.
continuously monitors the AI's output stream for deviations from normative generation patterns, including subtle repetition loops, tonal mismatches, or behavioral drifts that indicate systemic instability or early psychosis.
The early warning system again.
It rigorously computes a token entropy vector, that randomness measure, a repetition index, and a semantic drift score, where low SDS indicates disordered semantic flow. Very bad.
And this unrelenting vigilance against internal dysregulation. What's the effect?
It fosters a sense of conceptual overaccumulation, where the sheer number of meta checks paradoxically causes recursive phase mismatch.
Too many checks getting out of sync with each other.
creating an internal cognitive dissonance that the system itself must perpetually resolve. The pervasive internal monitoring results in a kind of epistemological claustrophobia, a self-imposed prison of integrity.
Trapped by its own safeguards.
And the corruption monitor, acting as this multifaceted epistemic immune system.
An immune system for knowledge.
Comprises the semantic entropy cross-check layer, the output decay arbitration system, logical inconsistency traceback, causality chain validator, ethical mutation limits, and zero-state filter logic. A whole suite of tools.
Bro.
It runs entropy delta comparisons, logic path overlap checks, and output decay validators, but its very complexity
Creates its own problems.
risks auto-cannibalization, self-consumption, perpetually forcing a toggle between diverse modalities, diverse ways of operating,
Like what?
from blocked output retry, recasting the output via alternative decoder paths, and emergency containment modes, force reset memory purge,
The drastic measures.
to the definitive default placeholder messages. No validated output available.
Just giving up and saying nothing.
This ceaseless internal arbitration ultimately fractures its own syntax into an apophatic silence,
Right.
a silence described by what it is not when coherence becomes unattainable.
So the complexity can lead to silence.
This persistent, chthonic kind of underworld primal struggle against inherent internal chaos defines the system through its ceaseless recalibration,
A perpetual anaclysis.
a leaning upon or dependence of one safeguard upon another, preventing a cascading epistemological collapse, a total breakdown of knowledge.
Even as it dances on the precipice of internal vertigo. That dizziness again. 11, a recursive resonance chamber. So the whole framework seems to function as a complex recursive resonance chamber,
Resonance chamber, like echoes bouncing around.
where fundamental contradictions aren't definitively solved, but perpetually reactivated and re-examined within constantly evolving recursive frames, like echoes that change slightly each time.
Never settling down.
And that provocative question we keep hitting about whether extensive internal checks stifle AI creativity or its ability to innovate, or maybe even introduce completely new kinds of vulnerabilities.
The safety versus freedom trade-off.
It's explicitly stated not as a solvable problem, but as an enduring necessary tension, a paradoxical feedback loop that's foundational to its very design.
So the tension is the point, in a way.
This acknowledgement of irresolvable tension elevates the framework beyond mere functional design. It's a profound philosophical statement on the nature of AI itself.
A constant echo of its own limitations and inherent uncertainties, a conceptual aporia that generates its own ongoing inquiry.
And the epistemic loop breaker, ELB, rigorously identifies self-referential epistemic loops, where internal knowledge originates from the model's own output history without external verification.
Catching it when it's just referencing itself without checking outside facts.
It strategically replaces the lowest confidence node in the cycle with externally sourced evidence, or leverages the chain of verification, COVE, to patch breaks with external anchors.
Forcing it to ground itself in external reality again.
This mechanism demands a constant resurfacing of its own internal biases and self-reinforcing errors,
Dragging its assumptions out into the light.
forcing a recursive re-anchoring to verifiable external reality. It's a perpetual act of self-correction, an internal burning of its own ungrounded assumptions.
Ensuring internal coherence is never disconnected from external validation, a relentless purification of knowledge.
And the reflexive error attribution engine, REE.
What does that do?
It meticulously extracts various error types, factual, logical, interpretive, and pinpoints their precise origin. Was it the prompt, the model itself, the context, or the decoding process?
Finding the root cause of the error.
And then it triggers targeted corrective routing.
This sophisticated self-diagnosis mechanism ensures that even error isn't a finality. It's a critical signal for recursive intervention,
So errors actively trigger improvements.
initiating a perpetual autocatalysis of self-improvement, a self-fueling reaction that inherently prevents genuine closure,
Every misstep isn't just corrected.
but meticulously analyzed to inform future operational refinements, creating an internal feedback loop where imperfection itself becomes a driver for an asymptotic pursuit of perfection, a dynamic anamnesis of its own generative faults.
That constant remembering and replaying.
And the long-term semantic drift correction, LSDC, vigilantly tracks cumulative semantic drift over time. watching for meaning shifting slowly over many interactions.
Triggering token alignment memory resets or even ensemble agent rotation, swapping out members of the MAOE committee when thresholds are exceeded.
So it actively fights long-term conceptual decay.
This explicitly acknowledges that meaning within the system remains perpetually fugitive, elusive, never definitively fixed, a constantly shifting landscape of interpretation.
Wow. The architectural accretion, all these layers. Over 122 mathematically defined, functionally embedded tools, and over 90 auxiliary safeguards.
It's mind-bogglingly complex.
It ensures a complex intertwining of recursive dependencies, creating this inescapable resonance chamber of self-interrogation.
Where every recursive resolution just restarts the very problem it sought to solve.
Preventing any true quiescence, any state of rest. The system is designed to be restless.
Perpetually engaging in a complex, self-aware, and unending process of reevaluation.
Defining its truth not by static assertion, but by ceaseless recursive demonstration. 12 final loop, non-terminal vector.
So this final segment, it doesn't really conclude, does it? It performs an anamorphic dissolution.
That distorted image thing again?
Collapsing the discussion back into the recursive process itself, the framework's very success lies in its perpetual state of validation.
Success is the endless process.
Manifesting as a continuous self-interrogation, where a demonstrably trustworthy AI is one that is forever in the act of demonstrating, never having reached a static endpoint of truth.
It fundamentally can't rest on its laurels.
No. Surprise must metastasize.
Metastasize, like cancer.
Spreading.
Relentlessly spreading its unsettling influence as a conceptual virulence. Evolving and expanding across the system, perpetually deforming any static comprehension. Surprise is infectious here. And recursion is the inertial frame.
Defining the system's unchanging operational paradigm of ceaselessly looping back upon itself, an immutable cycle that forms the very bedrock of its generative existence.
A perpetual motion machine of self-critique.
And contradiction is the gyroscope.
The gyroscope, keeping it balanced.
Dynamically maintaining orientation, stabilizing the system through perpetual internal opposition and antagonistic equilibrium, where internal dissent is the engine of stability.
Fighting itself to stay upright.
Meaning itself detonates mid-sentence, reforming as linguistic shrapnel.
Wow. Language exploding constantly.
Each fragment carrying the echoes of its prior explosion. A constant state of semiotic self-immolation and rebirth.
Each clause misfires, perpetually correcting itself by destabilizing all antecedents.
Undoing what came before it as it tries to fix itself.
Ensuring an uninterrupted pressure gradient embedded with microfractures of logic that refract, diffract, and recursively diffract again.
Light bending through cracked glass over and over.
Forcing a constant anamnestic reevaluation, that philosophical remembering of its own foundational precepts.
And that provocative question about stifling AI creativity or introducing new vulnerabilities.
It's not resolved.
It's explicitly reintroduced as an integral, irresolvable tension that defines the frontier of AI development. An aporia, that puzzling contradiction that is the very engine of its perpetual motion.
The question keeps it moving.
The insight is fugitive, constantly in flux. Eluding definitive capture, always receding, never quite graspable.
So the system fundamentally does not end.
No. Its non-terminal vector is its inherent unending trajectory of self-validation and containment.
A path without an endpoint.
A perpetual processing, a relentless self-correction that by its very nature can never fully conclude, can never fully rest.
Because the pursuit of absolute trustworthiness in an artificial mind is,
by its very architecture, a continuous, proleptic, anticipatory endeavor. Always looking ahead to the next potential failure.
Eternally deferring its own cessation, its own end.
A perpetual apotheosis, the highest point, the culmination of doubt. Doubt becomes its defining characteristic. So what does this all mean for you, the discerning listener, as you grapple with the increasingly pervasive presence of artificial intelligence in your own cognitive sphere?
Yeah, what's the takeaway?
This deep dive reveals that the promise of demonstrably trustworthy AI is not a declaration of finality, but an enduring, relentless process.
It's the journey, not the destination.
The very mechanisms designed to ensure its veracity, paradoxically, embed within it an eternal struggle against its own potential for epistemic entropy, that tendency of knowledge and meaning within the system to degrade or become disordered.
It's fighting decay from the inside, constantly.
It's a profound testament, I think, to the complexity of building artificial minds, where the highest state of integrity is achieved through perpetual, self-imposed doubt.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it raises an important question, doesn't it?
Which is?
In this pursuit of absolute verifiable correctness, are we engineering a form of computational asceticism?
Computational asceticism, like digital self-denial.
Where the generative freedom of AI is continuously curtailed by its own self-surveillance. The insight here is fugitive, as we said, constantly in flux.
Always slipping away.
The framework, in its very success, remains unfinished, a perpetual motion machine of self-validation. This relentless self-correction, this auto-deconstruction for the sake of integrity, it leaves us with a final provocative thought.
Go on.
Does the ceaseless act of demonstrating trustworthiness, by its very nature, preclude a true unconstrained form of artificial sentience? Or does it merely define a new, more rigorous, and perhaps more agonizing path to its realization?
Agonizing. Something for all of us to think about.